It's a while for the email. There we go. Morning, YouTube, folks. Post Christmas. Hopefully everybody's recovering. Tweeted those out and we get the podcast started. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. Thursday, December the 26th, 9:20 a.m. Central Time. Sorry, Scott and I had to catch up a little bit on our Christmas stuff. We didn't want to bore you with those details, all the great presents he and I got from Santa Claus. So that will stay off the recording, but we wanted to get on here and stay in the regular schedule, and plenty of things going on as we discussed in our pre-show meeting, which is like 2 minutes of us talking before we start hitting record. Our preparations, but we'll get through this thing. Hopefully, everybody had a wonderful holiday, and if you're still celebrating holidays, hopefully you enjoy those as well. Hanukkah and Christmas falling on the same day this year. I don't know how unusual that is, but I found it something that I didn't remember happening a lot, so kind of neat there. But as Scott told me, he had a good holiday. I had a good holiday, and I am not going to Nashville. I didn't ask you, are you going to Nashville?
No, I'm going to the Rose Bowl.
Okay.
So I'm leaving the 31st, but so I'll get a chance to watch the game down in Nashville, which I'm excited about. I would have liked to have gone, but you know how that goes. I can only be in
Yeah.
one place at one time. Although I did, I guess I say that then last weekend I was at Notre Dame and Ohio State, so there was some of that. But no, I'm not going to Nashville, but I've just been trying to catch up on some of the things with Iowa, and it's kind of cool, I think, the way things are going.
Yeah, me as well. Plenty to talk about in Hawkeye land and what's going on with that. I actually did write some notes down today.
Yeah.
We'll have some Festivus stuff going on here. We're going to talk transfer portal, a lot of that, because I know that's kind of the main conversation right now in Hawkeye Nation is acquisition and the transfer portal. Now that the prep recruiting signing day is long gone and behind us now. And we had a men's basketball edition. We'll talk a little bit about men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling getting back in action this weekend. So get barreling towards the new year and a lot of good stuff happening in Hawkeye sports. Um, in terms of where do I want to start here? I looked this up, Scott, last year. I don't know if do you guys have an athletic transfer portal person like Pete Nakos and Matt Zenitz?
We did with Max Olson, but now
Okay.
he has left us and went to ESPN. So now we're kind of all trying to pick it all up. But I'm paying attention heavily to the Big Ten. I'm tracking every move. So
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of, and I give those guys a lot of credit for the work that they do in the
yeah.
transfer portal. 247 estimated last year that 25% of FBS football players went into the portal. I've got to think that number goes up this year, and part of that's a function of the reduced roster size, so that's going to increase it as well. I worry about some of the guys in there. I'm hoping as many guys as possible can find homes, but this is just not a good system right now.
No.
It closes Saturday, this period of the transfer portal. That's when the bowl games will pick up pretty heavily, and they don't want both of those things going on at the same time. Student athletes that are competing in bowls the 28th and beyond have an opportunity to go into the transfer portal in January for 5-day window. So that'll open up again. Um, it's just, it's so much to keep track of when you think about all this stuff, Scott. And, you know, I used to joke about when Alabama and some of those bigger schools had these recruiting, like, what do you call it? Almost departments,
Yeah.
like a part of their programs. And now pretty much everybody needs those, right? Because
Mhm.
it doesn't stop. You're constantly evaluating and looking for guys.
Yeah, I had a long conversation with Tyler Barnes around signing day, kind of about the stuff with the portal and for a while, maybe they would through about 2 months of the season they would do just a little bit of dabbling. They wouldn't really pay a lot of attention unless they heard something. Then the last month of the season is when they really started to pick it up. When they thought people would, who was going to enter the portal, taking a look at as many FCS guys as possible. And you have to have that because this is player acquisition. This is every bit as important, if not more important, than who you select with the freshmen, which is really sad. And it's unfortunate for the freshmen. I think those are the kids that get hurt the most because you think about some of the walk-ons Iowa has who are getting legitimate offers. They're committing to teams and they're getting full scholarships. I think Kyson I can't pronounce his last name. He's from Western Iowa. Came to Iowa as a walk-on tight end, flipped to tackle. He got a full ride to Fresno State. That's really good for him.
Yeah.
But then you think about the guys that, Iowa signed 15 freshmen. Usually it's 20. So
Yep.
then there's 5 extra guys that normally would come to the University of Iowa to play football that now maybe there are going to be a couple of them will be walk-ons. Maybe some of them will go to MAC schools. But then the trickle-down effect is you got this big pool of kids that have nowhere to go. And that's really sad. And it's unfortunate, that it cut so heavily with to 105. But speaking out of the portal, when you're looking at teams that are replenishing, replacing, sometimes completely redoing their roster, they have to have that. You have to be able to go out and pick quickly because they do have resumes. You see them very quickly. And in some ways it's like the NFL draft where these teams spend so much time investigating the guys they pick in the draft. And a lot of times they also have to pick for the free agents. But they can't spend as much time on them. They have to rely on what they've seen previously and what they've seen on tape. So yeah, every school's got them. And some of them are even more invested in it because it is such a player acquisition. I mean, this has changed the game, no question about it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting too. I was looking up some information on the transfer portal windows and things like that, and I stumbled upon there are actually transfer portal windows for all the sports in the fall. And I'm looking cross country, field hockey, men's soccer, women's soccer, and volleyball all have transfer portal windows that are open in December. Volleyball's is actually still open till January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting that those things are going on in all sports. And as somebody who watches volleyball, my
Mm-hmm.
daughters are involved. If you didn't know, that's part of the reason why. But I enjoy the sport and recently had its national championship. Congratulations to Penn State. Big Ten wins another title, and
Yeah.
great story there.
Yeah.
Head coach battling cancer, and they uh, they were not the pick to win that thing
No.
going to the Final Four. But the sport is certainly picking up, and if you look at the top teams, they are they Penn State. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Juravic's
Yeah.
daughter went to Nebraska and now is at Penn State,
Right.
and she helped Penn State beat Nebraska. That's just, you talk about another sport and the change in balance of power. I think we're seeing that a little bit here in football as well, Scott. Indiana now has another good quarterback,
Yeah.
and it just seems like the teams that are able to figure it out are the teams that are having success right now, the most success.
Yeah. I mean, Indiana is the ultimate moonshot,
Yeah.
opportunity where a new coach walks in the door at a historic loser and completely revamps the roster, brings in his own players from James Madison who are very successful at that level, and then complements them with other players from other rosters, and then has a small holdover, and then they had a schedule that allowed them to kind of foster and grow, and then boom, they were one of the best teams in the country this year. That's what everybody's going to say. Can't we do that? Well, no, that's once in a lifetime. But
Yeah.
but then you look at various levels, and yes, it's possible. And it comes down to being able to figure out, what you can and can't, what you need to get, what you can't get, what works. And I think about some of them in recent years that really changed the dynamic. Jamison Williams was the 4th wide receiver with Ohio State. When
Yep.
they had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and he was number 4. He goes to Alabama, he's number 1, and then he becomes a first-round draft pick, and he's a pretty good player there too.
Yep.
and then you look at, just on and on and on and on. And there's a lot of shuffling. There's Quinshon Judkins who went to Ohio State, and you kind of look at it and go, really, did this really pay off for you? Because you were one of the best running backs in the SEC, and then now you're sharing time. But but you can remake your roster so much quicker. And you look at Iowa's case, where would Iowa be at quarterback if it wasn't for the portal? I mean, they're still searching for another quarterback too to go along with Hank Brown, but the opportunity to grab another quarterback, I mean, you'd be scouring JUCOs, and otherwise you'd be like, no, there's no free agency in football. Remember that term all the time from Kirk? Well, now there is. So you just can't pick them up in the middle of the year.
Yeah, and I think we're learning that, not that it's a surprise, but you look, we're still at the early stages of this whole NIL transfer portal way of building a roster. And so we're looking for trends, we're looking for things, and it seems like it's pretty much settled in now that it is a seller's market. If you're a talented guy looking for a new home, you're going to have a lot of suitors, and you're going to have picks that probably you didn't have coming out of high school in a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And it just changes the dynamic of everything. And that's kind of, if anything, we've talked about, the importance, and you kind of touched on this, the importance of each school finding its soft spot or sweet spot. What is realistic? What can you obtain? If you can't beat Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, what have you, the blue bloods, for the most part, in high school recruiting, chances are you're not going to beat them in the portal either. Now, there's money and different things that are involved here. It's also involved in high school for the highest level. But I still think Iowa's working through this, Scott. They're still working through what's attainable because, even in this cycle, we saw the big name quarterbacks right away, right? People got excited. Miller Moss. Then it was Bo Pribula. That's exciting people because those are name guys, right? And I don't think you stop going after guys like that, but you also have to be realistic and say, Hank Brown is a guy we really like, and we don't have a lot of competition for him, but we're a developmental program, and we're still going to have to develop guys. And then there are other positions, Jonah Pace from Central Michigan, who they acquired last week, who came in through the transfer portal, defensive lineman, really good player. But that's at a position where you can sell things a little better than you can at quarterback or wide receiver. So all of these things at play, Scott, it still feels like Iowa is still trying to work through this. And that's
Yeah.
not unusual, I don't think, because I think a lot of schools are.
Yeah, and there's a couple of levels that make it challenging that for fans. And I think, as much as, and maybe when we talk Festivus week, I might go the other way on this, but I kind of understand this because it's not so much that, damn, Ohio State beat us out for that Rice tackle, because
Yeah.
guess what? You're Ohio State and you're going to beat you out for everybody.
And they're going to
Maybe,
have more money.
and they're going to have more money. And now, today, next year, that's going to be
Yeah.
different, and that'll change dramatically. But I mean, there will be some options outside, but for the most part, you can just kind of decide your own. But it's not so much that. It's that now you're looking at Minnesota and you're going, damn, they're getting 4-star receivers, Malachi Coleman from
Yep.
Nebraska, and Logan Loya from UCLA, and Tyrone Tracy's brother, and you're looking at these guys going, why can't we do that? Why can't we go out and get them? We should have more money. We're Iowa. I can understand that plight significantly. Now, there's Iowa style, and Iowa is, I won't say they're aggressive in certain aspects, but they're also patient, which a lot of times this is knee jerk in the portal, and it
Do you
works.
think do you think that's hindering them in this, that they sometimes they take too long and get that's my worry, just because I know how I know what works for them in high school recruiting, and that's being patient and selective. I just wonder if that's out of their comfort zone right now in recruiting the portal.
Yeah, there's I think in some ways, yes, that you worry that they're not aggressive enough in certain areas. Maybe that's, whether it's money, it's offering, but they're also getting guys on campus and they've
Yeah.
offered them. And the guys that they're getting on campus and then they're offering, it's kind of like tiered. You have the tackle who's at Ohio State that, well, damn it, you're going to get somebody named Ohio State. If you didn't, you probably get him.
Yeah.
But there's a definite seller's market for line of scrimmage play, which is exactly what happens in the NFL.
It's funny how it's kind of aligning with the NFL. The quarterbacks you would expect, but like defensive tackle, star receivers.
The shit that people do not see, the stuff, I'm sorry. That
Merry Christmas.
people think, oh, we need to get a wide receiver, we need to get this. And it's the line of scrimmage that matters. I mean,
Yep.
quarterback does too, of course, but Ohio State went and snagged Minnesota's or offensive tackle,
I
and
saw
that
that.
set an uproar up north. But yeah, I think in some ways Iowa has a lot to prove in the passing game, which is why I think receivers are very either reluctant or they're taking their time before they're making their decision, and quarterbacks too, but especially receiver. And then I think in the other positions, Iowa is maybe going big game hunting a little bit, or they're going to get players that have other suitors. And so you've got to be kind of patient there. Now you could say, you know what, throw some more money at them. Well, you don't have unlimited funds here. And as we've seen from some fans that, well, I'm not contributing after Cade McNamara. Well, what do you want? I mean, I understand that there's not an endless spigot here of money, but that to me is just self-defeating. When you say, well, I'm not going to contribute because of the situation with Caden Proctor or Cade McNamara took all our money. That doesn't come from you anyway, but you can't think like that. Next year will be different, but this year, I don't know. Again, some of these people, they're getting guys that just kind of offering them and saying, here's the money, and then they're taking them, and then they don't play out. But then you've got in Indiana, or I would say Michigan State was pretty good at this last year and getting guys who fit right away. And I think Iowa's probably got to figure out a way to get a little bit more on track there.
Yeah, I'd agree. And it's not through, a lack of effort. I don't think they're being unrealistic in most instances. It's just the hurdle, right? As Scott said, of convincing a quarterback that this is where, Bo Pribula, you look at, he's going to Missouri to school that's got a better offense than Iowa. It throws the ball better than Iowa. It's got a receiver that's probably going to be a number one, draft pick, first round draft pick. And Iowa just doesn't have that. And it's that, rock in a hard place. We need those guys to fix it, but can we get those guys to fix it? And that's the hurdle. And it seems like it's been the hurdle for the last few cycles. And again, you put your eggs in Cade's basket. I think the majority of, the public opinion on that was let's do it. So like you said, and if you're coming back in hindsight and saying, now I'm not giving anymore because Cade wasn't what we thought he was going to be, that doesn't make any sense because it's free agency and nothing is a guarantee. And Iowa right now, Scott, going into the spring, how comfortable do you feel about Iowa at the quarterback position as it stands today?
Not great,
I
honestly.
think that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's potential, and that's fair, and things can happen that way. And I'm not saying that it won't work out. I'm not being pessimistic on that Hank Brown's not going to be good or I mean, who knows? Maybe he comes in and he's, I've used that comparison a lot, Luke Altmaier. And to me, that's a perfect comparison to what you may want and what you think you may be able to get, which is a guy that got passed up, had a lot of talent because Luke Altmaier was talented at Ole Miss. They went out and got Jackson Dart. And you know what? That's the right move for Ole Miss. He was a really good quarterback. He was a better quarterback at that stage for sure than Luke Altmaier. So he goes to Illinois. They start him. He plays decent his first year. Second year, boom, he's really good. And that's something that you could potentially have with Hank Brown. The problem is it's potential. And I think there is such a raw nerve exposed among Iowa fans, especially, and I don't blame them, that there's been so much mediocrity to poor play at quarterback for so many years that you're just like, God damn it, get somebody in here who can throw the ball. I'm tired of it. Potential is potential, but you can't always think that way. But I understand it.
Yeah.
And the problem is, Bo Pribula was actually in the same boat. He was a backup at Penn State. He played a little more than Hank Brown did, but the potential is higher. It really is. He's now Hank Brown could come in and be very good, just like, but I think Bo Pribula is a guy that he comes in, you start him. He's that good. But going to Mizzou versus Iowa, all you have to do is just look at the offense. One's established, one isn't, and maybe it's that cut and dried. And, so then you got to look through the portal. And it's funny, I'm seeing guys in the portal right now that are available that are all, they're all guys that we all know. Deuce Hogan's in the portal. Joey Labus is in the portal. Cade McNamara is in the portal. JJ Cole, Jace Bauer. So there's guys who are local, and then there's guys who are at Iowa. There's guys who are at Iowa State,
How
and
many
they're all in there.
schools has Jace Bauer been at? He has to have been at least 3.
I think that Sam Houston, I think, was his second, and now he's going for his third.
Okay, maybe I was just counting the third one already.
Yeah, and the problem is when you get to this kind of you filter it down, you start to wonder, can any of them be better than who you already have? Because you don't want to just get a guy unless you need just a guy. Now, I look at Devin Brown as a possibility, but he's a Utah guy. But that might be, if you're not set in what you think you have next year, he's your 1-year guy. Go get your 1-year guy. But then is he better than Brennan Sullivan? I don't know. I think Bo Pribula is. I would say maybe Hank Brown can be that. Maybe Jimmy Sullivan can be. But we don't know. And the uncertainty at this position, which we've had now going back to Nate Stanley, is getting, because Spencer did a lot of nice things, but, he wasn't, he wasn't a championship caliber quarterback. And, but so I think
a pretty clear demarcation line, 2020.
Right.
And that. And we're still trying to fix it.
It's 5 years.
Yeah. Half a decade.
5 seasons. Yeah. And now you're still thinking going forward. And again, Hank Brown could be that guy.
And maybe Brendan Sullivan. I mean, we talk about on this, Scott. I think we all sometimes don't maybe give enough credence to guys getting better. And Brendan's older, so I think the window's a little smaller because you're like, can he really make a jump now? We've seen it here at other positions. You don't know. He may take a jump forward. Maybe Tim Lester unlocks something this spring when he gets a full spring with him, an off season.
Exactly.
You never know.
Exactly. And I think that's you look at Brendan, and there's some positives.
Oh, yeah.
And his running ability is as good as Iowa's ever had. I mean, look, people will talk about Brad Banks or whatever. No, he's better than Brad Banks as a runner.
Yep, I agree.
He completed almost 69% of his passes this year. They weren't pretty, but he got them there. And guess what? That's 2/3 of the thing to do. And but now he was 2-2 touchdown to interceptions. And the game against UCLA, the run defense wasn't very good, but let's face it, it was the mistakes on offense that killed him. And it was his mistakes. So he needs to get a better handle on that, not get totally neutered, but also be more careful with the football. And this is his opportunity. I still think, when you're looking at a game on Monday and you're at this stage and you haven't gotten that big starter, I mean, if he goes out and throws for 3 touchdowns, runs for 1, they win decisively, I think then they might say, you know what, maybe we like this pairing right now. Maybe this is the way we want to go. But if he goes out and if he plays like he did against UCLA, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to have to just get somebody else in here. And some of it may be at the lower level, and that there's no shame in that either. I mean, I'm not even saying G5, a Curtis Rourke type, but, like Abilene Christian with Maverick McIvor and people like that. So, and Ty Thompson's in the portal again, too, after last year, Iowa kicking the tires quite a bit on him. So this is his opportunity to do that. And I think Jackson Stratton has proved himself to be a capable number three. And Jimmy Sullivan is your guy that he's walking in the door. He's already there. He's already practicing, which is tremendous. Same thing
Mhm.
with Hank Brown. I think that's really a good thing that's going on. So, um, but I think the bowl game will determine whether or not they want to go and say, we have to get a guy versus we can still be patient if we want another guy.
Yeah, and that's kind of the race that they're running, so to speak. It's they need to do they're seeing what's happening in practice, right? They're
Uh-huh.
getting their eyes on Hank Brown now and Jimmy Sullivan and everybody right now. So they kind of know where the starting point is going into 25. This is it. Then they go through off-season conditioning and spring and things like that. But that's what they need to do. They can't worry about the court of public opinion because I think what Scott said earlier, people are like they've been beat up,
Mm-hmm.
by bad quarterback play. They've been
Mm-hmm.
bruised by bad quarterback play, insufficient quarterback play. And that's why there's so much excitement when a Miller Moss's name comes up or a Bo Pribula or the Malik Murphy situation that happened last week, the kid from Duke that hadn't signed yet with Oregon State. And did you see that? It was reported, and then like within a couple of hours, they threw Iowa in as a possibility for him.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then because he hadn't yet signed with Oregon State, and they're like, all right, he's not committed. And then within a couple of hours, one of the other, I can't remember which way it went, but the portal reporters said he had signed with Oregon State. And then the
Uh-huh.
Iowa's fans were mad. The Oregon State fans were mad because they thought Iowa was coming in to take their guy. So, yeah, that's the type of things that are going on, though. But in conclusion, the Iowa fans are hungry, starving for this position to be fixed. And I just don't know if anybody around, and I don't know what the feeling is inside of the building. From the outside, it doesn't feel like you're confident going into 25. It's hope and maybe and could and things
Yeah.
like that. It's not as, I guess, you don't feel as confident going in. But that doesn't mean it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, that's the hard thing is we're trying to balance the scale here. And the first thing I'll say is you asked at the very beginning, are you confident or whatever? And no, I mean, I'm not confident because until they prove that they're good, I mean, I'm just not buying it anymore. And I think that's the way most fans are. 2 years ago, Iowa was ultra aggressive, went and got its guy that it thought was going to be a very good quarterback in Cade McNamara. In fact, they jumped the gun and it cost their coach his first game. Kirk Ferentz, of all people, got suspended for that, and it could not have worked out worse. I mean, I am convinced that if somebody wanted to sabotage the Iowa football program, that this would have been a plant. The way it all shook out I mean, it took 1 to 2 days and his name was completely scrubbed from the roster. I mean, it's just that toxic, and tried to explain it in a way where I wasn't giving too much away, but he came out with his letter when they were on the way to Maryland, and then people were like, oh, see, we told you, you don't know what you're talking about. Zip it. We kind of know on this one. But yeah, I think there's a couple of names to watch. I mean, I think everybody's looking at South Dakota State right now, and if Mark Gronowski enters the portal, that's one to me that if you're Iowa, find the money, do it. He's a winner. He's won back-to-back national titles. This year they got to the semifinals, lost to a Solon, Iowa kid who's pretty freaking good. That would I've said it before, would have walked Iowa City to start here and would have been really good here. But if Mark Gronowski enters the portal, go get him. Period. I don't want to hear any excuses. I don't want to hear, well, yeah, it just kind of cost. No, GD, go get it. That's the kind of stuff that I would see. Now, there are other guys, because he's nearby and he played in Iowa City, against the Hawkeyes, and that landscape. That's the type of guy he fits for what you want.
Yeah.
And he's a winner and he's a proven product and he can play in the North and he's tough. because I watched the game against Incarnate Word where it was a cold ass day. It
Yeah.
was like it was like 7 degrees with the wind chill, and he's still got his shirts rolled up. He's like, my lineman do it, I'm going to do it too. Go get your guy and find the money. That's to me the kind of guy. Now, the other ones who don't have a relationship with Iowa, Malik Murphy, for instance, let's say he didn't sign and he was out there. That's different because then you're competing against the wide area. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm on a little spiel here, but that's the type of player that I think if you want to get him and pair him with Hank Brown or Jimmy Sullivan, if Jimmy Sullivan's the guy, you've got two guys, one who's going to start for you, the other guy who's going to be on a trajectory upward. Do it. But that would make me feel good about this position.
Yeah, and I mean, like we talked about earlier, um, when the portal closes again, start to identify who may come out on that other side in that five-day window in January, because you got to do the work now, because it's
Yeah.
going to be miraculous how guys go in the portal and commit on the same day
Yeah.
because the relationship have been set up one way or another. They got caught with McNamara, but there are ways to do it now to avoid those pitfalls and make sure you can get your guy. And if, like Scott said, if you're hearing Gronowski's going in there, now's the time to make your move and start to let him know through some channels that you are interested in his services. And I think they get that now. And so it could be a quick 5-day window for Iowa to maybe, because it's only been Hank Brown and Jonah Pace so far.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to need some more guys. And you still have the late window in May, but you really would like to, if you're at all, best case scenario, you want guys in here for the spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in this system right now today, that's you've got to do that, and
Yeah.
you've got to get your guys in. You got to get them in other positions because the building period is very important. Spring football is very important, and at all the positions, quarterback, of course, being top number one, but that's something that they've got to really push for. They're lucky that since they're not in the playoff or anything, that they're having a little bit earlier bowl game. So then, when the January 1st bowls or December 31st bowls kind of roll through, they have a day or two early to look into this as opposed to a couple days later. Now, yeah, there's going to be a 5-day window, but for a lot of guys, it's going to be up until Saturday that they're going to make their decision. And a Gronowski for me is one where he could go to the NFL. I don't know if he would get drafted, or if he did, it would be really late. Or he could go prove himself at a place like Iowa or somewhere else, or he could stay at South Dakota State and nobody would fault him for that either. He's a tremendous young quarterback. I just think that with a competitor like that, proving it at the Big Ten level is probably in his DNA at this point. What else can you do at South Dakota State? Do you have enough on tape at a high level against good competition that's going to be questioned against you in the NFL draft? But if you go to Iowa and you have a really good year, your senior year, yeah, you can kind of push it. So he's a guy I would be like, go get him. Go get him, period. I don't want to hear any excuses. Go get your guy.
I know Tennessee, Chattanooga, we mentioned him a little bit earlier. Sam Phillips, the wide receiver from Tennessee, Chattanooga, has visited here, among other schools, reportedly down to Iowa. Virginia Tech, who is in what bowl, Scott?
They're in the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
Damn right they are, against Minnesota. So, and then Memphis, 11-win Memphis. Don't discount Memphis in this. You talk about offense, yeah, and
a lot of money.
A lot of money, a lot of offense. It was funny because whoever it was, Pete Nakos or Matt Zenitz, whatever guy from On3 or 247 reported it, that the three schools. So he reported that he got their information from the kids' agents and agencies. So I clicked on there and I'm like, all right, who are they representing? And I looked, bunch of Memphis. I like, well, that's obviously a factor here, but Iowa still, he hasn't chosen yet. So this is the a situation I think that we talked about earlier. Iowa's in position here, but can it win against schools it should be able to compete with, but at a position it's been deficient at? And it's that can it get the guys to fix it that it needs to fix it? And
Mm,
this is a part of that, I think. He's 5'9". He's a smaller guy, 5'9", 165, 170, something like that. So not a type that they don't have in the room.
yeah. Until they prove it, it's going to be tough. It's just an
Yeah.
uphill climb, and you can promise a lot. Hey, we're changing. We're better. We've got a new quarterback. We've got a scheme. We're working our way up. We struggled at quarterback because of injuries and ineffectiveness. We're going to be better next year. All that sounds good, and it's a good selling point. But what these players are looking for is A, can I get paid?
Mhm.
That's that, and you know
Top
what?
of the
So
list.
God bless them, because that's what it
Yep.
should be. My marketability is never higher than it is right now today. Two, can I get to the league? And Iowa's track record isn't real good there either. Now it could change if the offense clicks, if you get a quarterback. This is not, this is an offense that has produced a lot of tight ends going to the NFL, which has hurt the what receivers, but it's also, um, you know, So anyway, I think overall, um, I think Iowa's just going to have to continue to prove it, and that may have to overpay. This is what happens for bad football teams in the NFL. This is what happens for teams in bad climates in a lot of cases, that you have to overpay to get somebody to. Now, like Green Bay in the past hasn't been as much of a problem because they've been successful and they had Aaron Rodgers. But
Mhm.
Buffalo in the past has been a problem to get people there. And Detroit in the past has been a problem to get people there because of it's not warm weather for living, and then they're not very good. So what the hell? So at any rate,
Yeah. And it's going to be, Iowa's going to have to hit on a Hank Brown. They're going to have to hit on receivers that maybe they see something. Maybe he's not as fast. Maybe he's not as big, but like they do in high school recruiting at positions where it's more difficult to recruit, identification is going to be really important here. And even that's not always the same and enough. And building relationships like they do with high school kids, it's a much trickier uh, task to be able to hit the transfer portal and succeed in there. All right, let's take a little break here. Before we do, I will let you know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you so much to Systems Unlimited. Hear from a few more sponsors right now, and Scott and I'll be back on the other side. Hang tight. On a dreary day in the Iowa City corridor
uh,
area, it's going to be tough to get motivated after Christmas with a dreary day, but we'll do what we can here. And guess what? Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch, right here in Iowa, can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Hardcore Hawk fans gotta have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 at gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 at gmail.com. Last and always not least, Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated, formerly of El Bandido's Perez Tacos. You will not be disappointed. Check out Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. I'm looking forward to some leftovers today, Scott. Got some leftover ham, stuff like that in the fridge. Maybe even leftover pie. There's bowl games on today, right?
Yeah, there is. There's the Rate Bowl. We finally got a Big Ten team playing in a bowl game. So excited about that. And of course, the mighty Chicago Bears play this evening, and looking forward to that game too. But no, not really.
Netflix and Amazon. Netflix yesterday, Amazon today. It's just, man, these leagues are spreading out and you're paying more.
Yeah. I mean, I already had Netflix.
Me too.
And the Amazon one, we've kind of been off on a few times. And so I always say, during the NFL season, I want it. And then we can revisit it after the end of the NFL season. So there's that. It's streaming services are going to become commonplace. And the interesting part, Rob, with the Big Ten and streaming services is they actually had more money from Amazon if they wanted to go that route over, I don't know if I should say, let's say either CBS or NBC.
I will say the Amazon stream, I don't know what your experiences have been like with it. I don't love it. It's been choppy at times and just freezes, but that could be my TV as well. But I thought the Netflix stream yesterday was great.
Yeah, it was pretty good for the most part. I didn't have any problems with that. Unlike when I tried to watch Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, that was an issue. That never worked.
But they worked out the bugs during that, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. You might want to, with that one, I'm thinking, you know what, guys, you probably should have done something different. You should have had like a tryout or something.
Figure skating trials.
Yeah. Badminton, sublease some field hockey games or something, soccer. But no, I was fine with it, and I'm okay with Prime. But the Big Ten could have landed Prime, but they were actually a little nervous about it, thinking that if they're going to go with a streaming service, they'd rather do it in connection with somebody they've already got a relationship with. And ultimately, NBC provided that with Peacock, and it kind of spilled over to basketball and stuff. So they felt a little more comfortable with that. I know fans are like, Peacock. Well, they're the same way with BTN 15 plus years ago. So it's just a part of the world's changing, and you just have to deal with it. But no, more bowl games today and tomorrow and throughout. It's going to be pretty hot and heavy. And the NFL, of course, is trying to, I won't say the word I'm thinking, but it's really, I compare them to your buddy that goes into the bar that's the best looking dude that you're friends with, and you look over and you see this girl and you think, man, I kind of like, wow, I'm gonna go talk to her or whatever. And before you know it, and your buddy's like, yeah, cool, man. Hey, here's some money. Go get me a beer. Get yourself one too. And then you go do that, and he goes over and starts talking to her just because he can. That's the way the NFL has been, deciding to schedule games head to head with the college football playoff last weekend
and beat them as you would expect.
It's the way the world works. NFL beats everybody.
Yep.
NBA, Christmas. Hey, this was our holiday. Not anymore. We're taking it away from you, and we're going to put it on Netflix, and we're still going to get triple the ratings that you get, even on a streaming service.
Yeah, it's gold mine.
You're our feeder system. We have all kinds of great historical relationships with you, college football. Just do not come to us on this weekend. And
we're going to take what we want, and you can have whatever's left.
Yeah, exactly.
To put a bow on this week's conversation on the transfer portal, as you said earlier in our conversation, you kind of track what's going on in the Big Ten in terms of the transfer portal. I think it's good for us to kind of compare, and again, one size does not fit all. There are programs that need more than Iowa. and programs that are leaning more on the portal than Iowa is. So it's not a direct comparison, but it is good to see what the competition is doing. And Scott has some information on that.
Yeah, and what I'll probably do is say that I have not checked it on Christmas Eve or checked Christmas Day, or I haven't updated, I should say. I have checked, but I haven't really
Yeah,
looked at it. But let's look at teams that are kind of in
like
Iowa's ballpark
yeah,
right now. Illinois being one.
hmm
Illinois, according to what, and I kind of check them with On3 and 24/7. I'll go back and forth to update them. They've had 12 guys up to Christmas Eve that have been in the portal. They've signed or agreed to terms with five. Leon Lowry from Wisconsin, who was a big pickup for Wisconsin last year from Syracuse and really wasn't very good at Wisconsin, just didn't fit right. Maybe he'd be better there, but they picked up two guys from Wisconsin, Curtis Neal and Leon Lowry. They picked up a backup quarterback and a couple other guys, one from Ball State, one from Florida State. So it's just kind of this, so they've got five guys. That's not bad. That's just a little bit ahead of Iowa,
It,
but
it it feels like that's kind of where Iowa should be right now, kind of
yeah,
in that five range, just addressing the positions that you and I have talked about through the weeks, where they may want to, corner, maybe at a
yeah,
corner. They got a
mhm,
defensive lineman. We talked about that. And obviously
yeah,
got a quarterback, receiver. But it feels like Iowa's a little behind right now. But again,
yeah.
there's 2 more days to this period, and then there's another 5 day window next month.
Right. And I think again, in a perfect world where Iowa would feel good about itself and leaving Bo Prabula out of it,
Yeah.
but like the tackle from Rice, if they would have got that tackle, they would have felt like, then it would have looked like, okay, they're really moving forward. They've got a starter on the offensive line, they got a starter at defensive tackle, they got a guy who's going to compete at quarterback. And then you just pick and choose your rest. And
Yeah.
and I don't mind the dabbling that Iowa does in the portal, unlike let's go to a different team here. Michigan State. Michigan State has, again, before Christmas Eve, things could have changed the last couple of days, but they
And,
grabbed,
and and Michigan State lives in the portal more than Iowa.
they always
It
have.
just, yeah,
Does better who the coach is, but and then this year they actually have lost some players that are probably bigger. Charles Brantley at corner went to
yeah,
Miami. That's a huge loss for them. I mean, he
yep,
was one of the best corners in the Big Ten, and then they went and got, they have 11 players out of the portal thus far, and will any of them be any good? Are they just guys who are going to compete? It kind of depends on your stage of development as a program. They're 5-7. Their best win was Iowa. They need players, and even if that means competing, Iowa has a pretty good foundation. They want to add to the foundation. They don't need a whole scale. We need 3 receivers. They feel like they like the receivers they have. Maybe they and meaning 3 that contribute and start and whatever. Minnesota is the weird one to me because they really have hit the portal really hard. I mean, they have 14 guys in the portal, and they're from all different groups. Now, quarterback, they took a real leap of faith here with Zach Pyron at Georgia Tech. He had decent numbers. He filled in for Hayes King at times, who was really good for
yeah.
Georgia Tech when he was healthy. Um, but that's who there's going to be their guy to replace Brosmer. And then they've got, let me see here. They've got two receivers, as I said, Javon Tracy, Tyron's little brother, and Logan Loya from UCLA, who was a pretty good receiver.
Yeah.
He really was. And then they've got they got a decent kicker. They really they targeted, but they've got 3 interior offensive linemen. Um, so they felt like they needed a lot more than just a couple of pieces. Nebraska, as far as I have right now, 27 guys in the portal now, and a lot of them are pretty decent. Some of them are also guys like Iowa, where you have walk-ons that need to find homes. And then they have 9 guys, they've replaced them. I would say that of the 9 guys, they are guys who have underachieved. Talented players, so they fit kind of what Nebraska has been. Talented players who have underachieved. Dason McCullough, linebacker from Oklahoma, was like a high 4-star, if I remember right. And
Yeah.
Now it is, another school. And Williams Waneri, I've never been able to pronounce it, from Mizzou. He was a 5-star, went to Mizzou, then he left. He barely played as a true freshman. They expected him to play, and now he's going to Nebraska. And there's a few others. They picked up a quarterback from Purdue, Marcos Davila, who's their number 3. He'll try to be the number 2 at Nebraska, and at some point maybe the number 1 with, depending on what happens with Rayola. If he goes to the NFL, let's just be pie in the sky. He goes to the NFL after year 3.
Hmm.
So anyway, those are just kind of some of them. We'll see.
How about
Whoever
Wisconsin?
Wisconsin is,
Let's
you
finish
know,
with them.
yeah, they're the kissing cousins for Iowa. They at what I have documented, 22 departures, which is significant, and 14 additions. They've hit some pretty good ones. They've hit guys that Iowa, I think, would have wanted, like the safety Matt Jung. He was
Mm.
from Bethel College. He was like a D3 All-American. They liked him. He goes there. That's one that you're like, but what do they have to offer versus what Iowa? He could probably start it there. At Iowa,
Yeah.
he's competitive there. Billy Edwards at quarterback, I thought was interesting, from Maryland. They needed to go get a guy. They got a guy. They also got the number 2, which is San Diego State's Danny O'Neill. Um,
He's young, right? He's a
yeah, he's a freshman.
freshman. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he's a guy you pair with Billy
And
Edwards.
he's kind of like
And
the Hank Brown for
yeah,
them.
right. And apparently that's what Iowa's plan has been all along, to sign 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Um, and then they've got a few other guys in there too that, the Idaho wide receiver Mark Hamper, um, Tennessee Martin defensive lineman who is like either first team all conference, and Corey Walker from Western Michigan, who is really good. I know Iowa looked at, and so they probably got a lot of the players that Iowa would look at and say that's the kind of guys we would want. But they, as we saw on the field, have a long way to go to be back to being not only just at a bowl game, but to be, somewhere else. One departure that I thought really was interesting to me, and this is when you see names that pop up, Rob, and you're like, I remember Iowa recruiting him, and then they leave and they're on year
Happens a
2 with him.
lot.
Yeah, yeah, you especially because you talk to him a lot more than I do. Amari Snowden, cornerback, he committed to Toledo. And I remember, didn't he want to play baseball at Iowa, or and
I
then
think so. There was
he,
another sport involved.
yeah, and he was like, he was going to go to Cincinnati because Fickle was there, and he was going to be able to play both sports. Then
Yeah.
he followed Fickle to Wisconsin. It didn't work out. He was only a redshirt freshman this year, so a year and a half. But he ended up. But like Will Pauling is a huge departure for them. I mean, I think they've lost still more in the portal than they've gained. But Pauling, he's a Notre Dame now. So now you're just like, oh God, if you're Wisconsin, you're losing value, and you're not sure if you're gaining value. So if nothing else with Iowa, and we could see some, we're not talking about what could happen after the bowl game. There might be a player or two that have value that decides to hit the portal, and they just stuck it out through the bowl game. So overall, I don't think Iowa's in a bad place. I just think that Iowa might be, they might be in a place where they're, they need some improvements.
Yeah. And, it's Iowa does a good job at, running the long race and not panicking. And that's a good approach with this, because you just have to go through guys and, get what you can get and build the best you can build. And then you still got, like Scott said, Wisconsin can get all the guys they want in the world. If they're not maximizing the talent on the field, which Iowa has been able to do, then it's still should be Iowa on top. When you were talking about Snowden, I was thinking of, I tweeted this during the game, Jordan Faison for Notre Dame, who visited here and was interested in
Yeah.
Iowa, no lacrosse program.
Right. Yeah.
And because Iowa loved him. Liddell Betts actually coached him in high school.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued with his tape. I was like, man, this would be a cool guy to get. And then watching him in the game that you were at against Indiana, he would
Yeah.
have fit nice.
He would have been great, and he's a great young man too. It would have been great for Iowa to get him. He would have been a real help. He was as good as anybody on the field in that position group for Indiana or for Notre Dame the other day. And we got a chance to talk to him a little bit after the game. And yeah, he would have been a fantastic addition, had that happen for Iowa.
Yeah.
But you lose out, it's just that's the tough spot where Iowa is. You look at the Nick Jacksons, and when you can get that over in Oklahoma, that really impacts your team. He solidified the linebacking core. He was an elite person and professional on the field and did everything you want. And it really helps solidify you. But it's hard to overcome that in the portal because of pay. And when Iowa competes in some of those situations against teams that have equal or even more status nationally. And beating Oklahoma for a linebacker is possible, but beating Oklahoma for a receiver, forget it. You're never going to do it. Even as bad as Oklahoma's offense was this year, which is why they were 6-6, it's still going to be really tough.
Yeah, and it seems like the hits and misses in the portal are more magnified than prep recruiting. Like if you
Yeah.
miss on a prep kid, sometimes the average fan doesn't even know who the guy is. They're like, until they do something on the field or we hear about them when they get here, people that don't follow recruiting, maybe those guys come and go before, but Cade McNamara, obviously that's magnified. Caleb Brown, those are the bad, right? And then you look at Nick Jackson. I think Eric All was a really good addition. It's a shame he got hurt,
Right.
but he fit really well. Rusty, I thought was a good addition, but then Dejon Parker was hurt and it didn't work out. And I think those have a tendency to get more magnified because we know who those guys are and because they're expected to help right away.
Yeah, for sure. And as we've seen, and sometimes, this doesn't rise to the level of Festivus, but it does rise to the level of relax a little bit. That you've got Iowa people look with tunnel vision. And if they lose on a Saturday, it's like they feel like the whole world's watching them and, oh, we're an embarrassment. No, you're just part of the puzzle. There's a lot of times there's 5 other games that got greater value or more. And then the same thing in the portal. Iowa goes out and gets 5 guys. 3 of them play, 2 start and are really good. 1 plays and is a contributor. 1 doesn't play because he got hurt and the other one wasn't any good. Then all of a sudden the attention glums onto the guy that wasn't any good. See, we were terrible. Now, the Cade McNamara is an eyesore for epic proportions, no question. That dilutes the whole thing. Dejon Parker, you know what? You took a flyer on a Division II kid, and he was hurt. He had a long way to go, and it was just, you know what? They didn't see it, and fine. That's the way it works. But don't stop swinging. You have your Jack Heflins and Rusty Fetts, who are interior linemen on different sides of the ball, who come in and they fill a role and they do a nice job for you. And that's what you want to get in some of these places. And Nick Jackson was a really good addition. I mean, elite level addition. And it's unfortunate the Big Ten has 18 teams and 10 elite linebackers because he'd be right there. But I do think if things don't work out, as I've said, Indiana picked up like 32 guys in the portal.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't hit. A lot of them are going to go back into the portal if they haven't already. But the ones that hit were awesome. And I think that's the case here with Iowa, is if they end up with 7 guys in the portal, which I think is possible, and 4 of them do exactly what you want, then it's a win. It's like going to the NFL draft. It's like recruiting in December. If you hit on 60% of your recruits every year, you're winning. Yeah, prep recruits, you're winning. I mean, I keep the numbers. I'm sure you do too, where you go back and then I'll kind of type out. It's like, is it a win? Is it kind of graded on a scale from 1 to 5. I keep a scale just to see. And there are years where a guy like a Ben Neiman, you're like, just a guy. Dude's still starting NFL games. Nick Neiman. Oh, he's just a guy. No. And then the guys you expect maybe don't work out. And a
Yeah.
lot of times it's those who are most vocal on Twitter and and hey, can I get some love from some Iowa fans? And and then all of a sudden year two they're gone. So anyway.
Let's hit some basketball real quick, Scott, and then we'll move on to a couple Festivus
Yeah.
grievances, and then we'll do some picks. Um, as usual, we kind of go long on our portal talk because it's so involved and there's so many layers to it that I think it does uh, deserve as much time as we can give it. There was a basketball edition last week as well. Desmond Briscoe. He's a power forward ish, stretch four ish type guy, 6'8, 220. He is from Indianapolis, chose the Hawkeyes over report. He's a 2025. He's a senior this year in high school. Um, Over reported offers from Butler, Cincinnati, West Virginia, and DePaul. Those were the most recognizable names on his list. And he joins Badara Diakite. I'm going with Diakite. 6'10", 190. He's from Connecticut, a prep school in Connecticut, and he chose the Hawkeyes over BC, Penn State, and Washington. He had already signed back in November. So two guys in the 25 class. I think they did pretty well. Briscoe, Scott, Indianapolis Player of the Year the last 2 years. So certainly productive in high school. The question is just kind of, can his skill set transfer to the Big Ten, 6'8", power forward, a little bit undersized for the league, but we see guys in all shapes and sizes make it, especially in the Iowa program. So pretty good addition there, and a late addition for Iowa. Iowa offered him, I think, 2 years ago or something. So one of those classic Fran keeps an eye on a kid. He played with Cooper Koch
Yeah.
on Indiana Elite AAU, so relationship there. So good addition for Iowa men's basketball last week.
Yeah, that's it is a good one. I mean, in Indianapolis, I think it's been a really good spot for Iowa in
Agree.
both sports. It's kind of under recruited in some ways, especially in football. It has been over the years, but also in basketball to some extent because um, you know, you go into that and the blue blood level is completely flipped.
Yeah,
If you go in Indianapolis, you feel like you got a puncher's chance against, IU this year, notwithstanding. Purdue, usually, Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to, and Michigan, they're going to get their guy. If they want a guy there, they're going to get him, or whatever. But then you feel like, okay, we got this lock on a Julius Brents or Tyrone Tracy or something like. And same thing with basketball we've seen over the years. I think Tony Perkins was a really good
hmm
pickup for Iowa there, and unfortunately he's not with the Hawkeyes anymore. But that's where IU's going to get its guy, Purdue's going to get its guy, and then the rest is up for hey, you feel like you can compete with a Notre Dame, a Michigan, and Ohio State for basketball players, and to get somebody who's got that kind of accolades, it means he's a tough player, a respected player, and he's a winner. Does he have the highest upside? I don't know, but I think he's a proven player, and I think in all sports that is the most underrated level. We
yeah,
see it every year. Like the NFL draft is perfect for that. You see a guy who's drafted in the fifth round, and you're like, damn, that guy was first team All Big Ten 2 years in a row, and he was really good. And then all of a sudden he goes in, and he's really good in the NFL. And then, but yeah, he didn't have the longest arms, and he did
yeah.
this, and that's the same way here that with Briscoe to get that kind of acclaim and those kind of attributes, you got to put him in, and you figure he's going to be a competitive player at worst. And if you get a guy who can help you in your rotation from day one and grow and help the team, you're in a great shape.
Yep, and an indie guy with offers from Butler and Cincinnati. I
Yeah.
feel good about that because those are two really good basketball programs.
Yeah.
Historically, consistently good and pretty good at identifying talents and getting those guys that Scott said that are below the Indiana,
Yeah.
Purdue level that they know they can hit. So good
Mm-hmm.
addition there. Iowa, after the layoff, will be back in action on Monday, December the 30th, and that's a 6 p.m. start against New Hampshire. The last non-conference game, New Hampshire is terrible, and then I will jump back into Big Ten play Friday, January the 3rd, and it'll be at Wisconsin next week. We'll talk a little bit about that on next week's podcast. I hope we'll try to corral Scott from his travels. Women's basketball back in action this Sunday, Scott, 2 p.m. Against Purdue. So jumping back, Iowa does have a game under its belt against Michigan State at Michigan State. So 0-1 in the Big Ten. This is one you want to get at home against a winnable game against Purdue. I thought Iowa got a nice push from Northern Iowa on Friday. Those are games, Iowa's had some trouble at the end closing a few games. It was good to see it be able to close out an in-state rival and win the state championship. So hopefully a team still trying to create an identity and come together and build chemistry and all that things with those things with a lot of new pieces. I thought it was a good step forward. And then Sunday, obviously, one you got to have. And it's on we were talking about streaming services. I noticed, Scott, next two women's games, BTN Plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to anger the public
Yep.
after, this is what happens year after year. I mean, when you have Caitlin Clark, you're not going to end up on BTN Plus. They want to show that game. And now you're going against everything else. You're going against men's basketball. And that's as much as women's basketball is probably more popular here now, it's still men's basketball does generate a little bit higher ratings. Now, I think that's the gap is closing pretty significantly, but that's something you do have to, take into account. It's going to be frustrating, but you're going to live through it. I think with, what I've seen from this team, and I didn't get a chance to watch the other day because I was at Notre Dame, but what I've seen from the losses and the wins this year is they still got a lot of work to do chemistry wise. And it's not, and it's understandable.
Yeah.
When not only did you lose the greatest collection of women's basketball players in Big Ten history, and Caitlin Clark being number one, of course, but then the others who are on first name basis for the fans.
Yeah.
They know who you say Gabby, they know who you're talking about. Molly, Kate, and of course, you can say whatever you want about number 22. You can call her whatever, and everybody knows who you're talking about. But when you lose that connection, that collection, it reforms. It's different. And then when you have Hannah Stolke, people know her, knee injury that required surgery in the offseason, and Sydney Falder, knee injury in September that required surgery. She was out until November. And Lucy Olson, who's new, and the other player, 4 freshmen who play a lot, and holdovers that their roles change significantly. A Kylie Feuerbach was kind of a get through the game type of player. It's like she'd come in at like the second media timeout until the third media timeout type of thing in years past. Now she's got a more significant role. She's starting, and other players are trying to fill that vacuum left behind by those players. It's going to take time to gel. And when you have those injuries, it's not as easy to work together. I think we've seen that with the Michigan State game was probably most prominent.
Yeah.
They struggled against aggressive defense, and they have a lot of turnovers because they don't know how to react to one another without the communication part. Whereas in the past, they had that all figured out. That takes time to work together. You're bringing the ball in against a press. Who's going to be where? I know you're going to be there, so I'm going to pass it to you, that type of thing. That still needs to work, I think, out of them, and it'll take some time. If they get it done by mid-January and feel good about it, I think you're okay. You're on good pace. If it takes you till second week of February, I think you're behind schedule. But the other part is I think they're very talented, and I think they're mentally tough, and they love playing the game. And certain players step up in certain games. Sydney Falder did against Iowa State. You had Taylor McCabe did against UNI. You have players who are just capable of big moments. That's really good. So it just requires more chemistry, more work. And Jan Jensen is, not to be overlooked in this, that she has room to grow too, in situational basketball, that she wasn't making all those calls. She was making suggestions, but she wasn't making all those calls. I think that was the Michigan State game is probably one that she lost sleep over because I think she made some decisions that helped lose that game. So there's a lot I like there. This is one you got to win. Penn State's probably one. It's going to be tougher. It's going to be tougher than last year. They're not bad. It's on New Year's Day, but at least it's on New Year's Day, and nobody's going to be there because they're going to be watching the football game. But I'd be remiss and I know, and I'm sure you probably plan to talk about this, but I'd be remiss to not give our 100% condolences to Jamie KV Langs and her family. This one cuts, man. This one hurts because I'm sure you got a chance when you were at the Press Citizen. I did at the Muscatine Journal. She would play teams like the old EIHC, even though they weren't in it, but you saw her as a prep, as a young player, saw her grow at Iowa. She's been a part of the program, but worked at the university. She was the voice of, along with Rob Brooks for several years. 41 years old, has kids. Today's the service. That's tough, man. When you see somebody grow up like that and cancer takes them this young age, that's really hard, man.
It is. I talked about this on the mailbag on Tuesday and kind of broke down a little bit, but feel a little bit more in control of my emotions now. But it's one of those things in life where you're just like, this is not fair.
Yeah.
And there's no way to reason with it or logic or any of that stuff. It's just really unfair for somebody. If you were around her at all, you understood how much she enjoyed life
Mhm.
and basketball and people and communication, and especially the Hawkeyes. I mean, when
Yeah.
she was on the radio call, there was no
Mhm.
gray area over who she wanted to win the game. Her, I used to almost cringe sometimes at her post game interviews because they were such fan like
Yeah.
interviews with Lisa and the players, but it became endearing after a while that she was kind of, that person that just promoted the program because she loved it so much. And yeah, as I said Tuesday, condolences to her family and friends and the program because it's a huge loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, life is really precious, and not this could have happened in the spring or the summer, and you'd still feel the same way. But there's always something that just drives that screw to your heart a little bit more when it's right before the holidays, and you think of three little kids.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk anymore about it. I think it's, but anyway, my condolences are to everybody who knew her and loved her, because she was certainly capable she was certainly a person that everybody could love in that way.
You can find some of the radio calls from
Yeah.
Caitlin, the Caitlin, Indiana call.
Yeah.
I would recommend people search those out. You can find them on social media feeds, Google them. Her calls will um, enhance what we've just talked about her love for the Hawkeyes and the sport and other people and all those things that are great about humanity that we need more of
Yeah.
these days. I don't feel right going to Festivus, Scott, so let's do our picks. I
Let's do our
can't go to
picks and then,
Festivus after that.
yeah.
But
Okay.
we need a bridge to let's do some picks here, and then maybe we'll
Yeah.
throw a Festivus or two out here to close.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it doesn't feel right. I know. All right. Our last week we had three playoff games, and we were 2-1. We both lost Indiana, which of course lost by 10 points. We both won Penn State, which was -8.5 and won by 1,000, and then Ohio State, which turned away 40,000 Tennessee fans in tears. They were -7.5 and won by 100,000. So today we've got the Rate Bowl, and it used to be the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, also known in a former life or two as the Insight Bowl. And Rutgers is against Kansas State. Kansas State is giving up 7 points today. What say you, Rob?
This is a tough. These games are these non-playoff bowl games are even tougher than they used to be. I am going to take Kansas State because I think Kansas State's the better team, but who the heck knows in the Rate Bowl?
Yeah, and it's like when we start to pick bowl games, it's like immediately you want to go and, all right, what's their portal
I know
situation
who's
like?
who's playing.
You know, I did get to see Kansas State play Iowa State. I think they're a pretty talented team, and as long as I'm not completely whiffing on it, I think they have a good quarterback in Avery Johnson, and Rutgers does not have the best quarterback situation. I think they're a decent team, which is why they're in the Great Bowl. But I'm going to go with Kansas State as well. The Vegas Bowl is USC versus Texas A&M. -4 for the Aggies. This has been kind of pulled down. Oh, this is tough.
You
I'm
think
gonna
these
go with
fan bases are happy to be in the Vegas Bowl?
no,
USC and Texas.
no. I wrote
Yeah,
about that today about kind of next phase of the bowl games. It was one of my
yeah,
story is my story about what do they got to do in the future to kind of maintain their relevance and amid disappointment for a lot of teams. And now USC's disappointment was wiped out early. I mean they
yeah,
they were done and for the playoff back in September, but Texas A&M had a chance all the way down to the excuse me the final game. They weren't all that great, but they had a
yeah.
chance because they had an easy schedule in the SEC. Um, you know what? I'm going to go with USC. These games are screwy. Their quarterback came from UNLV, forced Miller Moss to the portal. Uh, I'm going to take them to win or be within 3 points, even though it's 4.
Yeah, the thought process here was like, okay, who's more disappointed to be in this game? And it's
Yeah.
probably Texas A&M, based on, as you said, USC was knocked out pretty early and just did not have a very good season. That said, I'm going to just stick with my pattern of picking the better team. Texas A&M is the better team.
Okay. That's not a bad bet on this one.
4.5, you said
4.
4. Okay, I like that even better.
Yeah. All right. Pinstripe Bowl. Thank God we're not there. Um,
What's the weather?
I don't know, but I can't imagine it's as bad as it was in 17. That was
No.
nasty. Boston College versus Nebraska. The Huskers are -4. This one's tough. I think Nebraska might win, but I think it might only be by 3. So give me BC.
Yeah, I ain't betting on Nebraska. I'll take Boston College.
Yeah, it's they hung with some pretty good teams this
Yeah,
year.
they're not a bad team. I think he's got a chance to get that thing going. He's got to get that next phase of getting from where they are now to the next is what people haven't been able to do since like Doug Flutie.
Yeah, right. I mean, they had Matt Ryan there for a few
Yeah,
years. He was pretty good. And other than that, it's been just, I mean, BC is just BC, And it was funny. I covered back in the old ACC Big Ten Challenge. Iowa played at Boston College in '08, in Licklider's second year. So I went out there, covered that game. Andrew Brahmer missed they got fouled with no time left.
I
Had two
remember
free
that.
throws. He missed the first front end, so it was done. But what I remember was BC, I think, was going to the ACC championship game, and their football facility was right next to the basketball arena, and um, it was an open practice. I could sit there and watch them.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this isn't Iowa where
Yeah.
armed guards practically. So we'll skip the Hawkeyes for now and save it for the end. But the ReliaQuest Bowl, Michigan versus Alabama, -12.5 for the Tide, who were horrifically left out of the playoff and tragically so. So says everybody on my timeline when I dare say things. But you know, I don't know if they're going to be happy to be there. Where I think Michigan might be pretty damn motivated to if you're Michigan and you had a bad year and you end your season beating Ohio State and Alabama, what a year that is. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I'm going to say they're going to be within 10 points.
I'll take the Tide.
Mm.
Michigan is. I think they played their Super Bowl against Ohio State, and I think there's not as good of a team, close to as good a team as Alabama, but there is that factor. Does Alabama really want to be here?
Well, that they'll decide that if they win or lose, Rob.
Yep. Yes.
If they lose, then they didn't want to be there. But
Exactly.
and I remember when they lost 24-3 to Oklahoma, and it was decisive. It wasn't just a lucky game. They got their ass kicked. And I said, Alabama's treating this like it's a bowl game against Oklahoma. All right. The Sun Bowl.
Oozing.
Yeah, I know. This is going to lead into Festivus in a little few minutes, by the way. Um, the Sun Bowl, Washington versus Louisville. Louisville -2.5. I'm gonna take the mighty Jeff Brahms and take Louisville.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, Washington's an okay team. They've done some nice things this year, but Braum is when he has Miller Moss. I mean, they might be my pick to win the ACC next year.
Yeah, I had a feeling he was going to get it going there.
It wouldn't take long there. You know, he can
No.
get that's where he's from. He can get his athletes there. They're
And
gonna be
there's a
all right.
lot of talent down there
Yeah,
to choose from where they're located.
absolutely. I remember when he got Rondell Moore from that area, and it was
Yeah.
like, whoo, okay. All right, the Citrus Bowl, Illinois versus South Carolina. South Carolina -10. This is where, of any of the SEC teams could have complained that they were playing well enough to be in the playoff, that if they had 3 losses, it was South Carolina. They were playing really well. I would, if Pat Bryant was playing for Illinois, I might squeeze into that 9 points, but uh South Carolina was playing really well. That was a team that, when you're eyeing for Iowa possibly going into the Outback Bowl, or I mean the Iowa Quest Bowl, I'm like, yeah, you might want to stay away from that team. That's pretty good.
I'm with you too. And I think this is the type of level of a bowl game that South Carolina can look at and say, this is another stepping stone for this program that's trying to ascend. I think it'll be motivated against the Big Ten team. I think it's clearly the better team here. It's a lot of points, but I guess I'll throw them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're I mean, if they go 10-3, they win 10 games.
Yep.
And they're on, they're probably, if they do that, they might sneak into the top 12, something around in there in the final rankings, maybe even 10th. That's a hell of an accomplishment for South Carolina in the season that they've had. And they lost
Yep.
some close games early that really prevented them from being there. The Duke's Mayo Bowl, and I'm picking this game no matter what I think. It's between Virginia Tech and Minnesota is favored by 6.5. I don't care, because the only thing I want to see in this game, Rob, is I want to see PJ with a giant tub of mayo, because
On
it's
his
going to
tie.
be, yeah, it's going to be the meme of the millennium. So I am taking mighty Minnesota to beat Virginia Tech in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and so we can get that meme-worthy dump of PJ Fleck.
I'm with you. I'm picking based on rooting interest here. And the rooting interest is for PJ to get doused. So I will
Yes.
take the Gophers as well and throw the points.
Yes, absolutely. All right, now we've got the couple of playoff games to pick. And the Rose Bowl, which I'll be next on January 1. Oregon versus the Ohio State University. Ohio State giving up 2.5 points. I tell you what, this may be the toughest game to pick across the board, win or lose, let alone points or no points, because chances are, well, I mean, the first one was a 1 point game, but
Yeah.
it's still um fudge. I don't know.
I'm
You
gonna
got to pick.
go. I'm gonna go Ohio State. Tough to beat the team twice. There's going to be motivation here. Ohio State looked fabulous against a really good Tennessee team. And it's not anything against Oregon. It's a coin flip game. Obviously, the spread tells us that. Um, I'm just going to go with the old dog in the Big Ten over the new dog.
This is such a perfect Rose Bowl, because you have two, the Pac-12 faction, Big
It's like
Ten.
nothing changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's New Year's Day. Arguably the two best teams that people are betting on to win the
Yeah.
whole thing. That's the unfortunate part, and that's what's got to get straightened out in the future. Is
Yep.
you can't, I mean,
This
Oregon
the
got a penalty.
seeding has been the bugaboo of this thing, and it's easily fixed.
Yeah. It's what's funny is last year would have been no problem,
Yeah.
because you had Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, and then you had Florida State that got left out and was undefeated, which is really unfortunate. But
Yep.
you had those teams, and it all fit. Well, when you have teams like the Big 12 is down, and ACC has a champion with 3 losses, and then you throw in a Boise State that only has 1 loss, then it's
Yep.
like, ooh. So as I saw Oregon play Penn State and play really well, and I saw Ohio State play Tennessee and play really well. I'm going Ohio State too. I'm not. To me, this could be the championship game, and it's just unfortunate it's going to be in the quarterfinals. But I think this could be come all the way down to the end. And then in the Fiesta Bowl, this is an interesting spread. This is going to be hard to determine. Penn State versus Boise State. Penn State a minus 11. And I think Penn State's going to win, but I'm going to take those points for Boise State because I think Ashton Genty is going to get some yards.
This is just a tough one. I'm with you. I think Penn State wins it. And that's a lot of points. I'm going to take Penn State here. I think it's playing really well as well. Clicking. Boise State, this is a big spot after a long layoff.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my reasons.
Mm-hmm. I don't fault you. I think Penn State is playing well. I mean, that's really to me where my opinion of Penn State changed was when I was in Indianapolis. They were down 28-10 in the second quarter to Oregon. I thought, okay, they're dead. This is going to be a boat race. And they came all the way back. I mean, they were competing and they made a couple of mistakes and it cost them against a really good team. But, they were 45-37, 8 points, one score and a two-pointer away. They laid the wood to SMU at home, which I figured they'd do anyway. But and then I think they win. I just wonder if this could be as scary as 34-17 with 30 seconds to go, and Boise gets in the end zone and
yeah, that 11 number is goofy.
Yeah,
that 10 point when it's 9.5, 10.5, that 11 is goofy.
Although if it is 34-17, they score and it's 34-23. How many people are going to say kick it? Versus how many people are saying no? Go for two.
Yeah.
So that will be kind of funny. Finally, then out of the bowl season, as far as our picks goes, we have Iowa versus Mizzou, -3 for the mighty Tigers, and yet I crunched the numbers as much as I could, Rob, and went through the rosters, who opted out, who's injured, who's everything. It's an even game. It really is.
Seems there hasn't been a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
Very few opt-outs, not a lot of major injuries, right?
Mizzou's health is very damaged in the receiving core.
Okay. Well, that's not good with what's his name sitting out.
Yeah, with Luther Burden is out. Mookie Cooper, who is their third receiver, is out with an injury, and their tight end, who is pretty good too, he's also out with an injury. Mm-hmm. They have one, Theo Weiss, who's really good. He's there, but they had their other opt out was a right tackle who's second team All SEC Big Ten or All SEC. Iowa's opt outs. We know Caleb Johnson and Jamari Harris, who are both probably equal in an ability at their position as the other two from Mizzou. Mizzou has a better passing game, but it's not a great passing game. Brady Cook's a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. So, receiving core, they're decimated. Iowa's a little better up front on defense with, but Johnny Walker's a pretty good pass rusher for them. The one thing where Iowa has a couple of strong advantages, they have way more interceptions, 16-6 over Mizzou. But that's not really my indicator. It's special teams. Iowa is clearly better. And at field goals, for instance, Iowa with Drew Stevens, who's a really good kicker, 19-22. Mizzou's 22-32. Mizzou's favored by 3. I think Iowa wins by 3. I'm going to take Iowa.
Yeah, you almost convinced me to go the other way and take Iowa, but I'm going to take Missouri here.
Okay.
And here's my reasoning. Iowa's offense this year has been Caleb Johnson.
Yeah.
And he's not playing. Mm-hmm. And that's no disrespect to the guys behind him, but he saved their asses a ton this year. Mm-hmm. Maybe Iowa puts it together in the passing game, but until I see them score enough to beat a team like Missouri, I just can't.
Yeah.
I think it's close, and I certainly would not be surprised. Obviously, a 3-point spread, even the Vegas, I don't think the motivation will be a problem, even though Missouri kind of fiddled around with the playoff for a while, but never, I mean, it was done pretty early
Yeah.
and early enough. So, but it's Iowa, Missouri. I think there's some trash here. I think there's some inherent dislike with the fan bases, and so I think there'll be motivation on both sides. I just think Missouri's a better team, and but I'm always wary of Iowa putting it together in a bowl game because I've seen them do it before.
We say this, Iowa is one of the more I haven't seen a team better in adverse situations.
Yeah,
And I would not consider this necessarily an adverse situation like I would some of the other times where it's like, oh my gosh. But they only had three players that were all SEC guys, and two of them are opted out.
yep,
Mizzou, they got obliterated by some opponents. The three decent opponents they played, they lost decisively. The road opponents that they beat, there were only two. UMass, I don't know how they even got stuck playing UMass on the road, but they did. And then Mississippi State, both of them were 2-10. So they also beat some decent teams, and their schedule is comparable. Iowa's schedule was not good. When you look
yeah.
at team for team, Iowa played, of course, they played Ohio State, which was phenomenal, and Iowa State, which was really good. But after that, only Minnesota had a winning record. Mizzou had a comparable record. They beat Vanderbilt in overtime. They beat Boston College by 6 at home. Both of them were at home. But they go to Alabama, lose 34-0. That's probably the equivalent of Iowa losing 35-7 to Ohio State. They lost close to South Carolina. It's probably the equivalent of Iowa losing close to Iowa State. They beat Arkansas by a touchdown in the snow on Thanksgiving weekend. That's equivalent to Iowa beating Nebraska 13-10. Brandon Sullivan, the last two full games he played, basically Northwestern and Wisconsin, they scored 40. Not to say they can now. Caleb Johnson's not there. I think it's probably going to be a field goal game, and I just like Iowa's special teams so much better because even I went through every efficiency, Sagarin ranking, and everything, and Iowa's as good or better than they are in every area, but special teams, it's just punting, even their Mookie Cooper, who's out, was their leading punt returner, and then you look at Caden Weegan, who's the first team All-American.
Yeah.
So there's just those hidden yards, those hidden kicks. Punting, if Iowa averages 10 more yards per punt, that's one more first down that they have to get. They don't have the receivers that they did. Iowa can stuff. So that's why I go with Iowa in a tough game. It's going to be.
I see that. Yeah, I could definitely see Iowa winning in the margins. That's the way it does it, and this is certainly a game that sets up for that. So,
Yeah.
look forward to see how it plays out, and hopefully I'm wrong. I hope the Hawkeyes can go out on a high note, and maybe Brandon Sullivan can build up some goodwill here for the coaches, for the fans to feel better about going into 2025. And I think he has an opportunity to do that, like you said earlier. So hopefully that's the case and show some progress here. Show something in the passing game to give fans hope going into 2025. I think that would be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you want to do here? I'll start with, and I think we both can speak to my main Festivus grievance is the nonsense that happened after we waited all this time for the college football playoff, and then instead of celebrating and enjoying it, it becomes this nonsensical attack on the first year of the event by major media outlets, and by that I mean ESPN's talking heads. I was disappointed in Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit the way they handled it. And it's a bad look when you're connected with a conference that you're trying to promote as being, what's the word I'm looking for? Not given enough playoff spots to. They make it seem like the SEC was disrespected here for some reason. And it rubbed me the wrong way. And now, if Herb Street and those guys came out ahead of time and were like, "This is an abomination. This playoff bracket's ridiculous. How can Alabama and Ole Miss or whoever not be in there?" Then I give you some
Mhm.
props. You saw it coming. You called the blowouts. But then to go and scream from the mountaintop that you know for Alabama and Ole Miss, and then Lane Kiffin with his nonsense on Twitter. I just think for an opportunity to celebrate the sport and to embrace this new, venture of a college football playoff, I just thought it sucked. And logic, there was no logic used. There wasn't like this can happen. It happens when there were four teams. It happens in the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament is still a great event. It's just I thought it was just a bad look for the sport, and I was disappointed. So that's my main Festivus grievance this year.
And you know what, Rob? That's exactly mine too. And I'll go, and
And you even have a bigger stake in it because you cover college football on a broader scale than I do, and it just you're inside of it, and it had to be disappointing for you guys because you're out there covering these games.
I I mean, I have anger and I have disappointment. And I'll start with disappointment like you. I thought Kirk Herbstreit was better than that. I really did. I thought Sean McDonough was better than that.
Yeah,
I thought
another
Chris
guy.
Fowler was better than that. This is to take what angers me about all of this is that the most hated team in this country is not from college football team, is not from the SEC. It's not from the Big Ten. It's not Notre Dame. It's the overachiever. Everybody tears down the overachiever in this country, and it sucks. It sucked for 2015 Iowa and fake ID. All they're doing is winning games. All Indiana did this year was win games. They played the schedule they were given. They were given two teams that played for the national championship in January, and neither one of them lived up to their rank or their ability. That's not Indiana's fault. They played those teams and they won those games. They had the best season they ever had. That should be celebrated. Oh my God, what a Cinderella story they had. They went to Notre Dame, they played a better team, and they lost. Guess what? Blowouts have happened forever in bowl games, in BCS games, in 4-team playoff games, championship games happen. They happen. Yet we turn this in, not we, media as a whole, and then by extension, the SEC, turn this into some sort of referendum. Indiana didn't belong. Who cares that they were 11-1? Well, the committee's got to look past that. What do they need to look past from Indiana? That they averaged 28-point margin of victory over their teams. They outscored their teams 43.4 to 14.8 or something like that. Well, that's pretty freaking dominant to me. That they were the best run defense in the country. Indiana, that they held opponents to 70 yards rushing. They were 11-1 in one of the two best conferences in the country. What did they not prove? They proved they belong. Yet them and then SMU the next day was all, the committee got this wrong. They need to look past this. They need to look past that. Okay, now let's give you what the SEC has. 3 teams with 3 losses. In what world do they deserve to belong? They lost their opportunity. Alabama lost to a 6-6 Oklahoma team, 24-3. That was their second win and only had 2 wins in the SEC. They lost to Vanderbilt, who, by the way, lost to a 3-9 Georgia State team that was the worst team in the Sun Belt. Ole Miss gave Kentucky its only SEC win in a 4-8 season, and they deserve to belong. You had your opportunities. The SEC is at the head of the table. It has the benefit of the doubt. If it's 10-2, it gets in over SMU. One of them, pick them. They're in. You had your chance. You didn't get in. And so SMU, which has also been overshadowed by Indiana as one of the great seasons of all time, to go up a level to a major conference, to not take any media rights money because you want to be there that bad, and go 8-0 in that conference and lose on a last-second field goal, and now you're going to disparage them? This is ridiculous. And then finally, I capped off the weekend. I went Notre Dame and Ohio State. Ohio State let Tennessee have it. They let the SEC have it on the field, and the fans did as well. And I could not have been more proud of them, frankly, because they played when the game was over. They played a really sarcastic version of Rocky Top over the loudspeaker, and the student section stood up. They were all still there. And when Tennessee's walking off the field, they're chanting SEC, SEC. But did we hear anything from the powers that be in the ESECPN about Tennessee getting mopped way worse than Indiana did, almost as bad as SMU did? No, they doubled down on it. There's a conflict of interest, and they own all the parts. And because the Big Ten's not in their genre, they're feeling their muscles a little bit and flexing and saying, we need to, stick up for the SEC here. There's no sticking up for it. We don't re-legislate and litigate the NCAA tournament, Rob, by the first team left out on Thursday afternoon. You don't see those, on late on Friday night, Jay Billis or something goes, I just think it's a tragedy that Iowa had to go play in the NIT, and play Utah. You don't hear that. So why are they taking something that everybody's excited about, that involves teams that are underdogs, classic underachievers, going to rare air, losing games in incredible environments, and just wiping themselves with this topic? I don't get it. And it frustrates me, as you can tell, because I'm, going off here, and rambling. But, I got a problem with you people, and you're going to hear it.
Yeah, it was annoying, and I'm glad we were on the same page as that. I think most people were. I think people that aren't, just rose-colored SEC glasses understand. Can it be fixed? Yeah, the seating, as we said, they've got to fix that. But it's not a surprise that the teams that were playing at home won. That's their reward.
Yes.
They get to host at Notre Dame. Pretty good home environment. Penn State's got a few people in white that show up to their games. Yeah, tough place to play. Ohio State, yeah, place to play. So it's not. It's their pushback on it, to me, is disingenuous, because the thing that what happened was kind of what it was expected to happen. Maybe not blowouts as much. You want closer games, but it's 1 year. Who's to say that next year a team like SMU doesn't go into one of those environments, catch lightning in a bottle, and pull it off? Then what are you saying? Then what's your commentary on it? Oh, Alabama should have been there instead. And then we're all deprived of a really cool moment in sports where Boise State or SMU or Memphis or somebody like that wins at a historically prominent destination venue. Those are what we're hoping for, right?
Yeah, I mean, next year, if it's a similar type of seating arrangement, and let's say Michigan is the number 5, and they're playing Memphis, or they're playing Tulane or something like that, and they get upset at the Big House, that's the equivalent of Boise State beating Oklahoma or Appalachian State beating Michigan. Yeah. That's an incredible upset, which is what the public, except for those fans, the home fans, want. And Indiana and Notre Dame was the better team. I was, watched the whole thing, and there was and Indiana.
That's another whole. Indiana didn't play the way Indiana was played. They were more. I thought Kurt was more conservative than he'd been in the past. He didn't go for it as he did all year, and it bit him in the ass. But that was his choice,
right? And then there was a 2-play sequence that really dictated the whole game, which was an interception at the 2-yard line to Xavier Watts, who's phenomenal, and then Jeremiah Love busted out a 98-yard touchdown run. I mean, I don't like to do the what if this, that. However, if Indiana even gets a field goal on their first drive, that changes things. I mean, and then there's a ton of people in SEC land, and Lord knows because I've been tweeting about it that they've come after me on it, and I don't care. I'll give it right back to them on this. And it's like, well, anybody with a pulse could see, or anybody with a brain could see that Indiana and SMU didn't belong. No, I thought maybe Tennessee was in that ballpark too, but but I'll say this: I think all four teams that lost deserve to be there. I didn't see any team that I thought they got the shaft. They got left out. Illinois had 3 losses. They lost at Penn State. They lost at Oregon. And lost a close game to Minnesota, who's better, in my opinion, than Oklahoma or Vanderbilt. They're 9-3. I'm not screaming about Illinois. They need to be in there. South Carolina, I thought, was maybe the best of the bunch, but they lost 3 games. 3 games, to me, unless you're a champion, is kind of a deal breaker, unless there's a bunch of them.
And if you look at the SEC hierarchy, Tennessee was clearly in the field. They got destroyed.
They beat Alabama.
So you're going to put one of those other teams that's theoretically not as good as Tennessee, and you're arguing that they should have been in.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
No, it's just a disingenuous argument, and it makes you look weak.
Yeah,
because you're connected to what the conference you're trying to advocate for.
Right. The best thing that they and then there's this discussion that ever since the pairings were set that, well, now we're going to have to reevaluate our non-conference scheduling. You know what? You play 8 conference games.
Exactly.
You have 4 non-conference games. 3 of them generally are garbage. 3 of them are nothing. You play your FCS opponent the week before your rivalry weekend.
Yes.
Almost all of them do. So you have that. What are you going to do to water this down anymore? Because that's how you've lived for all these years to have, and that's where I always come down on the whole complaint of the SEC is when you have your penultimate weekend, you're playing Mercer or you're playing Samford or you're playing some other team in the South that's you're going to beat. You allow your main guys to rest. The Big Ten doesn't have that. And so when you got a good team going on the road and, let's say, let's say Ohio State and Michigan, in the penultimate weekend, then they're playing Wisconsin or Minnesota or Illinois or somebody like that. And there's no chance to rest like the way that they are allowed to in that conference because they have 9 conference games versus 8. So this whole thing was not only disingenuous, it was disrespectful. And I really think tone deaf. I mean, because the SEC has been agreed to for years as first among equals. It gets the spots. Yep. I always thought that Auburn stole the last BCS spot over Michigan State because of their campaign about Jay Jacobs, the Auburn AD, saying it would be un-American and if an SEC team didn't get into the BCS championship game. And they've been able to coast through it. One time, they don't match the criteria, and then they're whining about it. And it would not surprise me at all if they go 0-2 in the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
Notre Dame, Georgia, Arizona State, Texas. Those are games they could lose. And if they do, and they don't even get to the semifinals, there's going to be there really needs to be a lot of self-reflection in that. And they need to figure some things out for themselves.
I will end with this. I'm hoping karma goes at work here and we get a Memphis, Boise State, somebody like that winning in Oxford or somewhere like that, because then they've got nothing to say. And it's certainly possible that something like that can happen. It's sports. We see upsets in the NCAA tournament. We can all talk about them through the years. They don't happen all the time, but it's going to happen in this college football playoff at some point, and it's going to make these guys look even stupider. So,
no
if that's possible. So, yeah. All right, man. We ran this almost 2 hours, but it's a post holiday podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We enjoyed talking Iowa and beyond. Enjoy the game on Monday. Hopefully the Hawks can pull this one out and a high note. Get to 9 wins again, which I think is, whenever you do that at Iowa, you get to 9 wins. You do that anywhere. That's a really good season. And I know this season kind of fell short for some people, and there were high hopes. But if they can end this on a nice winning streak and win this bowl, get some momentum going into next year, Brendan Sullivan finishing on a high note. Let's all hope for that. And have a happy new year. Scott and I will be back to talk to you. I'm not sure what his schedule is going to be. I'll let you guys know what time, if and when we're able to do a podcast next week, but we'll get together soon and let you know when that is. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. Have a happy new year. And we'll talk to you on the other side. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.